much better planned, but none of my planning. It was just a great situation, but it wasn't always perfect. They did not want a male teacher.
This is Teacher Talk.
Oh, that's a nice title, isn't it?
Let's get straight into it. So, Kane, we left off, we found out you was going to go to Italy. Mm-hmm. You'd got a position. Everything sounded fantastic. So, go ahead. We set off to Italy.
You'll be pleased to know this time there were a lot more plans in place.
Very good.
Yep. Not mine.
Okay.
But it was so much more organised because this time I was walking into a fully made position. I think there was I was contracted to 22 or 24 hours teaching a week. Mm-hmm. Accommodation was included, already set up. Food allowance, driven to and from lessons, which if you remember the last episode when I was saying about the interview, it said you need a full driving licence because the year before, teachers had to drive themselves to and from lessons. So just another reason for not worrying about the job description. I might not have applied, and in the end, I didn't need a driving license because I was driven to and from. So it was much better planned, but none of my planning. I just turned up.
Turned up and everything was there, chauffeured around. No, that's good. In relation to your living, obviously where you was living, you said obviously that was included. Tell us a bit more about that situation. What was it? Was it a flat for yourself? Was it shared accommodation?
Yeah, well, first I just want to get into, because obviously I said Italy, in the last episode, going to Italy, it was Napoli, that's what I was told. So I was told, I flew into Napoli, I was picked up from Napoli, and then I'd never been to Italy, I'd never been to Napoli. I Googled it before, of course, to see what the city was like. And I remember driving back to, the accommodation where I'd be staying. And the longer I was in the car, I was thinking, this doesn't look like the Google images that I'd seen. I was like, is this Napoli? It was a concrete jungle. In the end, it turned out I was just in a small town outside of Napoli, a town called Pomiano d'Arco, which is not Napoli. It's half an hour outside of the centre. But it wasn't a city like I thought it was going to be. So that was a shock, but I didn't care. I was in Italy. And the accommodation, like I say, the accommodation was included, but I wasn't living alone. So it was, as I'm going to describe it, it would seem like a very unusual setup. So basically I was living with another teacher. There was me and one other teacher, and the boss and her two kids. Her two sons. The oldest one, he was in the last year of high school, so like 17 or whatever, and the other one was around 15. Okay. So going into that can seem like, what, you were living with your boss and you were living with your colleagues, and then there were the children as well around. It can seem a little bit strange, and on paper it was, but the longer I was there, we just it was just fine. It was in fact, if anything, it was a great situation to be in.
So, as we've already learned, you're quite a sociable person.
Yeah.
Willing to go into the park and chat with locals, network over in Barcelona, even with, like, say, non-teaching or students, multiple different sectors.
Yep.
What was it like in Italy?
It took a few weeks before I ended up having any kind of social life, and it was actually from one of the students that I had. So one of the students, I was preparing for an IELTS exam, one of the Cambridge exams that people use for getting into university or getting a job or living and working in the UK. He was, about 5 years older than me, so he was a bit older. And I think he was sort of my first friend. He just asked me one weekend after a couple of weeks. He asked if I wanted to, say, why don't come out for a drink, come and meet some friends, come and meet some people. And I remember telling my boss, because I was like, I don't know if that's okay. It's a student, even though he was older. And she was super excited. Like, she was really happy, like, because she then knew that I would have friends and people to go out with. So yeah, I think that was the first.
Settle in a lot better.
Yeah, and it did. It really helped to settle in, because I started hanging around with him more, met his friends, and they became my friends, and they still are. today, like 12 years later.
So we talked about you settling in a little bit, and of your first, finding your feet.
Yeah.
Talk about the actual school.
When I describe it, it seems like a really unusual setup, and it is. So there was no school building. We were teaching in people's homes. So the school they'd only been doing this for a couple of years. I think this might have been the fourth, it seems like too long. I think when I was there, the first year that I was there, it was the third year that this school had been running. Now, my boss's sister lives in Spain. She's built a school there. So they both kind of thought, well, let's do it here. Maybe we can do something similar. And basically their business plan was just to call, get people interested, parents who want the kids to have English lessons, so there would be groups of 6, find one of them that was willing to give up their kitchen, living room, dining room, whatever it is, and the other kids would go, and we would be in somebody's dining room, living room, kitchen, and we'd be teaching 6, most of the time it was 6, sometimes 7 or 8, in a kitchen and a living room for 2 hours.
Definitely an unusual
once
setup.
a week. And now what the school has gone on to, I'll get into that later, but now what the school has gone on to is next level. Like, it's unbelievable. But it started from a very, very simplistic idea. Let's get some people around the table and teach. That's all you need.
Again, initially, my first thoughts would be, people won't allow 6 other kids come round and teach.
Oh, they did.
But again, if you don't try, you don't know.
But a lot of that came down to my boss. A lot of her background is in kind of sales and things like that. Her family did lots of things like that. She's very good at selling. She's very good with people, very good at convincing people that something is good for them in a really positive way. And she was just brilliant at that. The reason it's so successful is because of her. She became a mentor to me. I learned so much from my time there. And that's how it worked. So again, on paper, I think, let's say now, looking back, would I have taken, now with my experience, would I take a job like that? Probably not. 99% sure I wouldn't take a job like that. But I still wanted more experience. The thought of living in Italy, that was stronger. And I thought, I can still learn something. And I didn't know. I didn't know any better. It's not like I'd worked in many schools and this is how things are done and that's how things are done. It was a completely new experience, completely new idea. And I just went along with it, and it was brilliant.
No, and how did you find it actually going into somebody's home? I know what you mentioned obviously before of teaching people online, or like the time when you did the demo lesson. Obviously, and the parents watching, you're in somebody's actual home, which steps it up another level, really, I'd say. Yeah,
it does. That first sort of week, the first couple of weeks, really getting used to that, because you just kind of knock on the door and they're expecting you, and you know that they're expecting you, and you go in and you're just kind of sitting in a living room waiting for people to arrive, and there's always awkward moments, especially if some of them don't speak English. I'd only been there a few weeks. I didn't speak any Italian. Most of them actually did speak a bit of English, and they knew the situation. My boss was very clear. There's a table that you cannot be around. You can't be interfering. It's a lesson. Even though it's your home, thank you, but it's for that 2 hours, it is a classroom. Please don't interrupt. And she was very good at that, very strong with those rules. Doesn't change the fact it was awkward sometimes. But because of my social nature, I think I'm pretty good in people's homes. I'm very respectful, and people realise that very quickly. But just one of the things, to go back to what I was saying in the previous episode about the interview. Do you remember I said that it was a really intense interview? And I later found out why. That was one of the reasons. I was the first male teacher in this school. Previously, they only had females. One of the reasons for that, so when the parents found out that there was a male teacher coming, there was uproar. And I didn't know this until maybe a year or two later. There was uproar. They did not want a male teacher in their house with their kids. And I didn't know that. So imagine, here I am, I'm going to be a teacher. That first couple of weeks, I didn't realise nobody wanted me there. But again, I think because of my nature, because of my personality, people very quickly realised that, oh no, he's a nice guy. And the kids were happy, the students were happy. So that very quickly disappeared. But to have had that kind of unknown pressure from the very beginning, or before I'd even landed, once I accepted the job, parents knew I was coming, and there was uproar.
Well, it's not just that, not just for the parent in the house, it's the parents who sending the kids to the other house, who don't have oversight at all.
That's even true. I never considered that. So you can understand the kind of worrying concerns, and I'm just glad that I wasn't aware of them when I started, and those worries and concerns very quickly disappeared. And now the school hires probably 50% of their teachers are male, and after that, it kind of changed people's mentality. So being the first male and having a positive experience, it did make it easier for future male teachers and parents' mentality towards it. So I was kind of like a guinea pig in that respect.
Yeah, it was a turning point for them though as well, which is again fantastic, and the school.
Being part of that was it's quite a big thing.
So you obviously settled in. How was your relationship with the other teachers? Did you learn from them, adapt from them? How did things go?
But when I arrived, there was one other teacher. I can't remember where she's from. I think she was from New Zealand. She was leaving. She had a boyfriend, Italian boyfriend. He was heading north, and she was going with him. So literally, as soon as I'd stepped in, who'd taken over from another teacher, this new teacher was now leaving, and somebody was stepping in for them. So there was a lot of change very early on, which kind of, in retrospect, when you're thinking like, what the hell's going on?
Well, I was just going to say, did that not give you any flags at that time, or give you any worries or concerns?
No, because I was loving it. I was really loving it. I loved the setup. I was getting on really well with everybody. Started to get my own friends, that kind of stuff. So I was loving it. Again, I was still young, 24. I was there for the ride. I loved it.
Doing your own thing.
Yeah. And I didn't put any thought process into like, okay, why are people leaving? Well, she was leaving because she was going with a boyfriend. No, that stuff happens. Yeah. And it's happened throughout my career, and it happens for any school. You don't know. You can hire somebody and they can quit last minute, they can back out last minute, they can walk away whenever they want. It's happened constantly throughout my career. So no, I didn't really look too much into that. And then what happened is 2 teachers came in, because now they were starting to get more students, so they needed more teachers, so they just hired 2. So they came in, but I had this thought about me. In Vietnam, I had all Vietnamese friends. I loved being around Vietnamese people whilst I was in Vietnam, and I wanted the same approach while I was in Italy. So I know that I was probably a little bit too, I don't know, let's say strict with that. So I can imagine I would have been a little bit standoffish, So I didn't mingle with them too much. Sometimes, of course, I did. We would go out for a drink, or sometimes they would come out with my friends. Yeah. But I did want to put something of a barrier between, this is my personal life now, this is my social life. Keep it as separate as possible, and I still try to do that today as well. I think most people do, if they're being honest.
No, definitely. I think it's healthy, if anything. I think it needs to be there. If not, then things do start going skewed a little bit, I'd say. I think you need that separation.
Exactly.
Now, as I'm aware myself, obviously, you'll explain now, you was in Italy quite some time. So how did things evolve at the school?
Right. So as I said, it was a very simple setup in the beginning. 6 students in a class in somebody's home, preparing them for Cambridge exams. Very simple setup. Mm-hmm. Early on, I remember my boss asking me, said, we've got this other group, or I've got this other lesson for you. Try it out and see if you like it. So I did this lesson. I was like, yeah, no, it's great, I'll keep it. So right, well, because you're now over your contracted hours, you can drop a class. And I know that she said, there's this one group, I know that it's difficult. If you want, you can drop that. And I said, no, I'll take it on. So I was taking on extra straight away. I wasn't doing it for any reason, try and make people happy. It was just like, I don't want to start dropping classes. I want the full experience. I wanted to experience as much as possible. And I'm glad that I did early on. And what was incredible about that, I think it was definitely the first place and probably the only school that I've worked at where that kind of thing was noticed and rewarded. You know what I mean? So my boss immediately was just like, wow, okay, so this is the kind of teacher we've got. Somebody who's willing to work that little bit harder. And I didn't ask for anything either, but she immediately said, right, well, I'll pay you more money. And I thought, great, I've been here a few weeks and I've already got a pay rise. How often does that happen? But she's that kind of person, that kind of boss.
Seeing something in you and seeing that you're showing that initiative,
Yeah.
it's good that she's able to see that and reward it.
Exactly. And even just being around the house, you know, we had this great dynamic. During the day was work, there was lessons and a lot of it was work. But in the evenings and weekends, we had a really good family dynamic as well. It was just a great situation. Work was thriving. I felt like I was really learning something. It was recognised. I was being rewarded for it. Family life was really good. Mm-hmm. Having a social life, everything was really good. But it wasn't always perfect.
Okay.
I think because it was a small setup, one of the difficult things is there was just my boss and now 3 teachers. Mm-hmm. Okay. And she was responsible for everything. She handled everything. She was driving teachers to and from work, 3 teachers. Handling all the phone calls, handling all the organisation, everything. She was doing everything. Also making all the decisions. And I remember it was the build-up to Christmas. And I remember her telling us basically like our Christmas schedule. I think it was like we were off from Christmas Eve to New Year's Day. And I was thinking, we're going to fly back to the UK Christmas Eve, which is really expensive, and then fly back on New Year's Day? I said, that's not really a holiday. And I spoke with the other teachers and they said the same thing, like, oh, but, you know, I don't want to say anything. So he said, I remember sitting down with my boss. I said, right, what we need to do, the 3 of us need to kind of stand strong with this, but be unified. We cannot attack her, but we need to be unified and go in and say, we want 2 weeks holiday. That's it, really simple. So we weren't attacking, and we sat down the table, spoke to my boss, you know, about Christmas, she really didn't like it, because she's very used to being in control. She makes the decisions, and that's what you do. But because I'd got us to be unified, it was in a very respectful way, she agreed to it. Mm-hmm. And she's since, actually, it was only a few years ago I went back to visit, and she actually thanked me for that moment. Because she said, now, she said, before I said I was crazy. I have no holidays, there was no Easter holiday. So just working from January 1st all the way to the end of June, 6 months. And she'd actually thanked me for it. Mm-hmm. She said, we needed that. So I started to introduce this kind of communication system because I was much better at talking with her. Mm-hmm. And the other teachers were afraid of saying anything. So I became some kind,
intermediate.
Exactly, between her and the other teachers. So again, I took on that responsibility just myself. I thought it needed to happen. I'm happy to do it, to get things done.
But that's a good thing, because obviously that's a good working relationship, having good communication. But then on top of that, obviously you've been able to show her a healthy work and home life balance kind of thing, then again, it's going to be a lot more sustainable. So what else went on, and what else? How did things progress?
You know, thinking back, it was a wild couple of months, because I went there the end of September, I think. So, you know, I'd been there now at this point 2 months. You know, a teacher's already gone, 2 more have arrived. This new life that I've got, and everything's crazy. And then, so we'd agreed on the holiday, the Christmas holiday. So as I said, there are only 3 teachers. 2 of us are living in the house with boss, the 2 sons. There was no room for the 3rd, so the 3rd one had a separate apartment, all paid for, but it was a room in a much bigger apartment on the other side of town, right? She was unhappy, but she was quietly unhappy, because I think it was her first experience. She felt very alone, very isolated, very much out of the loop, which I can understand, because Now we're getting this really family dynamic between the two teachers and the boss and the kids. So when she would come over, we would be sitting down having lunch together, all these private jokes and things like that. And she felt very much as an outsider, which I completely understand. Had it been me, if I'd been in that situation, I wouldn't have felt like that. It needs a certain character to be able to live alone and to be, away from everybody else or whatever it is. She was not that character. She left. Yeah. So there's work for 3 teachers, but there's only 2 of us. So pretty much December, or the last 2 or 3 weeks in the run up to Christmas, was insane. Because my boss was now trying to put that teacher's students in our groups, but make sure they're in the right group, right level. But you've got to think about location, where people live, and going to that house and that house. It was a crazy, crazy 3 weeks. And I think my boss was really grateful for the 2 weeks holiday in the end,
Thankful that was booked in.
Exactly. Because that's all we could think about. Like, it's almost Christmas, it's almost a break, we've got 2 weeks. Because it was pretty ruthless. But again, just another learning curve that these things do happen. Teachers will come and go. You don't know what's going on. But we need a new teacher. So I asked, let me do the interviews, or at least let me do one of the interviews. The other boss who does the interviews in Spain, my boss's sister, I said, you do the first and I'll do the second, or vice versa. Let me do the first one and I'll send people that I think. So I wanted to do the interviews. Thankfully, they agreed, because it felt like something was going wrong. Something was not being told. Something was not being shared in the interviews. And it wasn't a case of, okay, I'm just going to do all the interviews and it's my opinion. It was like, well, let me do the second interview, or let me do the first one and recommend. So I thought, I'm not looking for a teacher, I'm looking for a personality. So we started interviewing. I did a couple of them. One of them just stood out because of her experience, because of her background. She'd travelled quite a bit already. So I thought, well, she'll be fine with that. I was honest and open. Exactly, this is where you're going to be living. This is the environment that you're going to be living in. This is the lifestyle that you're going to have. I just gave her the truth, gave not just her, but the other candidates the truth, without trying to be negative. It was just the truth. This is what it is. And we ended up hiring that teacher, and it was the right thing to do, because then the 3 of us, we stayed. Nobody else left that year.
Again, just confirming expectations from the start, exactly what you're getting.
Exactly.
And laying it out. Again, a very simple idea, but if you're not doing that and you're trying to sell a dream, you can understand why there was issues.
Exactly. And that then became the model moving forward. Just tell people the truth. Just tell people exactly what it is. Then there are no surprises.
Now, you finally got a stable of teachers to look after, obviously, all the work.
Only took 3 months.
Again, no messing about. Just jump in and get it done. How did things progress from there? Because again, I assume the school obviously went on, and again, I assume there's other things that could have happened in that time.
Well, there was another big realisation straight after Christmas, actually. As I said, we were there primarily for Cambridge exam preparations. The idea is all of our students, or 95% of our students, were going to do a Cambridge exam at the end of June, the end of the course, right? It was our job to prepare them. And I remember coming back after 2 weeks of being back in the UK, and I'll be completely honest, I was lazy. I was like, what am I going to do? Should I do lesson plans? I was like, I can't be bothered. Like, I know, I'll give them a test. It was completely and utterly, it was just pure laziness. So I just photocopied tests for all the different levels. But within my laziness, we came to a really stark realisation. The kids weren't ready. They were not ready.
And this was in January?
So this is in January. Now, of course, we had a lot more time, but for them to have zero readiness, if that's the right expression, do you know what I mean? They were not prepared for that paper whatsoever. It's a mock exam. It's exactly what to expect in the exam. They didn't understand the instructions. Everything's in English, right? They don't understand the instructions, nothing. Some of the kids were in tears. I just did this because I just couldn't be bothered planning. All of a sudden, all my kids are in tears. Oh, I don't understand it. But because of that, I went back and spoke to my boss. And I said, is this what these kids are preparing for? She's like, well, yeah. I was like, well, they're not ready. They're just not ready. They're not going to pass.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, they'd been doing this for a couple of years. They'd had the same problem. Kids weren't ready. I was like, well, how do we prepare them? And that's what we did. Then we set about how do we prepare these kids. So my boss did a test for everybody. We said, right, we're going to test everybody. Let's find out what's going on. Same thing. All the other classes, all with the other teachers, kids in tears. Because they're like, oh my God, I don't understand this. And they were stressed because it's a test. So then we set about like, okay, we need to improve this. Basically, the course books that we were using weren't prepping them for the exam they were going to do.
Okay.
So we needed to start getting better materials to help prepare them for the exam. And then I set about doing a lot more research into the Cambridge exams, what's expected, the kind of exercises they need to do to prepare for the exam. And then we started to use them in the lessons. And then we said, let's do another one in 2 months or whatever. And it was much better. Because we'd now found, okay, we're using the wrong materials. Simple thing, really, really simple thing, but if you don't know, if you don't try, if you're not lazy, you don't find these things out. So again, because of that, because of my laziness, we come to the realization that we need to improve the materials, improve our lessons, the way we plan, the materials that we're using, the exercises that we're doing, because we need to prepare them for this exam.
No, yeah. Again, the fact that you was able to highlight that, again, it may have been through your laziness, but that doesn't matter.
Just through my constant naivety and nonchalant attitude.
I found it obviously terrible you'd be in such a bad teacher like this, but I do find it quite funny.
We all know.
Happy holidays. I hope you enjoyed your break. Now let me make you cry on first lesson back.
Here's a test.
Yes. I feel like
real
it's
teacher style.
Miss Trunchbull kind of vibes that you're giving off. But hey ho.
But that realization changed the entire course of the school. For the next couple of years, it really did.
So obviously your perspective on travelling/teaching's changed. So what happened next? Did you take over the school and change the name to Language for Life? Or
Not quite. Good idea though, actually. I should have thought about that. For the last sort of couple of months of that year in Napoli, it was Peru. The next destination was Peru. Because I'd been to Ghana, so Africa, ticked off. Well, again, this was never planned. It was just, I'd been to Ghana, so I'd been to Africa. Vietnam, I'd done Asia. Italy, I'd been on mainland Europe. I'd been on the continent. So I've done Africa, Asia, Europe. Let's go to South America. And it was that simple. Let's go to South America. And I chose Peru. Again, it was okay. It was still that, I still have that attitude, right? And that was it. I had that in my mind, like, right, okay, this is great, but finish out the year and go to Peru.
before obviously you thought of Peru, was there no part of where you felt attached to the school and, made you think, like, actually...
Very much so. Very, very much so. Things were going really well. I was starting to apply my skills into a work and business-like context. Getting better as a teacher. I had a great social life, great circle of friends. I loved the family dynamic. I was genuinely becoming a part of the family. But as I said previously, I'm plan A. I'm very much, this is what I'm doing. And of course my friends like, oh no, why, stay, why go to Peru? And I was like, no, I'm going to Peru. I have that stubbornness. But eventually I did sit down and basically have a conversation with myself. I was like, why am I so obsessed now? It's like, Peru will be there. I can still go to Peru. But why not come back? Why not do another year? Why not continue this? Why not build on what I've already done? and stick around here. So that's what I did. I decided to go back for another year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll learn more about that on the next one.
I can't wait.
Speak to you soon.
He was supposed to leave, but when everything's going right, do you just walk away? Next time, Kane doubles down in Italy.